Henry VIII gave England a performance of power almost nobody could match. He rode hard, hunted for hours, danced, and made his own physical presence part of the monarchy itself. He showed himself as a leader built for command, filling palaces with noise, speed, and force. He wanted his court to see him as commanding if in frame as well as rank. The accepted version of his reign often turns his life into two separate stories that barely touch. First comes the young, bright, athletic prince. He did not just wear authority, he performed kingship with muscle and momentum. For years, that form was part of his authority, helping sell the story that he was chosen, blessed, and unstoppable. He filled armor built for a man with a waist of about 32 inches. He moved like a leader who thought his own form would always obey him, and court life, foreign visitors, and official portraits fed that image. He was not meant to slow down, but rather to keep winning in public. He did not rule from a distance in the way some weaker monarchs did. He acted king in public through movement, mastery, and intense effort. Then one fall changed the rest of his life. The official narrative likes to treat his later decline as almost natural, as if time alone carried him from golden prince to damaged ruler. The archives disrupt that clean version, offering a turning point with receipts. It gives a date, a place, a physical event, and a long aftermath. In January 1536, at Greenwich Palace, he was thrown from his horse, and the massive animal came down on top of him. Reports say he lay unconscious for about 2 hours. The immediate fear was that he might not live, changing the air around the event. This was not a minor mishap at sport. It was a crisis at the center of the state. For those hours, the kingdom did not know whether its leader would rise again. The order of events tells you what witnesses thought they were seeing. People first feared he would not survive, and only later did he recover consciousness. The timing lands with stark force, sitting near one of the most charged years of his reign. This did not happen in empty space. It happened inside a live political system, always reacting to his moods and future. The court was not just worried about one man. It was staring into a possible crisis of succession. He did wake, and he did go on ruling, but the recovery was not clean. The crash left him badly injured, and a wound to his leg never properly healed. The Independent takes the story further by pointing to the possibility of a head injury. It says some accounts note he may also have suffered head trauma, and historians have linked that to later changes in health and behavior. When a crash leaves a man unconscious for that long, the question of head trauma does not come from nowhere. It rises from the scale of the event itself. The break was final in one crucial way. He never jousted again. Jousting was not a hobby on the edge of royal life. It was theater, status, masculinity, and command all at once. To stop forever after one crash says everything about the scale of the injury. Men do not give up a sport so central to their image unless their physical limits make the choice for them. Royal museums. Greenwich folds that simple fact into the wider decline, landing with real force. Not after recovery, not later when stronger, not once more for appearance. A ruler who had once dazzled through motion now faced limitation every day. His physical frame stopped speaking the old message. Accounts of his armor show the massive transformation. Measurements suggest his waist grew from about 32 inches in younger years to about 52 inches later in life. That is a difference of about 20 inches. Armor does not flatter, nor does it smooth over memory. It gives undeniable measurements recorded in the clothing of war itself. The leg wound became a daily burden. Chronic conditions do not end when the crowd leaves. They follow the person into every morning. His affliction lasted for 11 years, all the way to his passing in 1547, The problem likely involved poor circulation and chronic ulceration, worsened by the crash, and kept in a cycle of swelling, infection, rupture, and drainage for years. The tissue kept breaking down, and the leg kept reopening. He let physicians return again and again to the same damaged tissue because he wanted to stay alive and in control of a frame that was slipping away from him. Tudor medicine had almost nothing else to offer him. A paper from the Journal of the Royal Society of Medicine says physicians believed the wound had to be kept open, draining, and purged of bad matter. Illness was still understood through humoral theory, the idea that disease came from imbalance or blockage inside the body. A wound that kept returning looked to them like a stubborn channel of danger. If it closed too fast, they feared the danger stayed inside. The physicians were not facing one event. They were facing a cycle where keeping the channel open looked less like madness and more like vigilance. They brought in the red-hot iron. Historic UK explains that cauterization was meant to burn away damaged tissue, reduce drainage, and stop the wound from sealing too soon. Effective pain relief and modern anesthesia did not exist in Tudor England. He had to endure the treatment awake, hearing it all, feeling it all, waiting for it all, and still agreeing, because the alternative looked worse. A leader could command nobles, judges, and armies, but he could not order modern pain relief into existence. He was yielding to their judgment because his condition left him no better option, trusting men whose knowledge belonged to a world of humors and are purging. The affliction did not quietly disappear behind velvet and gold. It broke down and became infected repeatedly. Observers described the leg as chronically discharging and stinking. The foul odor came from infection and dead tissue. A portrait can hide pain, and a robe can hide bandages, but scent is harder to control. It enters the room before the words do, lingering after the ceremony ends. It tells the people closest to power that something is deeply wrong, even when the official performance goes on. He was not only hurting, he was betraying the image of command he had spent years building. The ruler who demanded order carried visible disorder under his own clothing. The court around a damaged leader often grows tense, watchful, and afraid. Everyone knew about the accident. Everyone knew he stopped jousting, and everyone could see changes over time. This was not some hidden palace illness whispered about behind curtains. It began in public sport and moved into daily rule. A single bad day can be absorbed into legend, but a daily condition shapes temper, patience, sleep, effort, and pride. The people managing the treatments, dealing with the odor, and watching the decline kept reminding him of what had been lost. Every strain could undo progress, and every reopening could invite more complications. Some historians argue that constant pain, poor sleep, and chronic illness may have pushed him toward eating and drinking for comfort. This is not only about calories, it is about what people do when rest becomes harder and old pleasures vanish. If pain cut him off from that world, then food and drink became forms of comfort still close at hand. He lived at the center of one of the richest food cultures in Europe, possessing a large appetite and access to a high-calorie diet. Even without injury, that is a dangerous mix for a person moving less than before. The accident started a broader health decline that made excess easier and control much harder. The cycle fed itself. Reduced activity meant fewer calories burned, pain made movement harder, and illness ruined sleep. Eating could ease the day for a while, but more weight made movement even harder. A royal household can make it worse without ever meaning to, as servants meet appetite and kitchens answer demand. The official history acts as if his size was just character made visible, but the evidence shows a long physical collapse shaping his behavior. The monarchy did not stop. Because the leader was in decline, it adapted around the decline. People could see the size, but they could not always see the immobility and strain shaping that appetite. The court could still bring him meat, wine, sweets, ceremony, and flattery. It could not give him back the freedom of motion that had helped build his early image. He passed away in January 1547. Everything about his burial was meant to say the same thing his reign had always said: power, scale, control. A leader like him was supposed to leave behind majesty, awe, a body guarded by ceremony, and a final journey fit for someone who had spent decades making himself larger than everyone else. He was heavily embalmed, meant to preserve enough dignity for transport and burial. But embalming was not magic. He was placed inside a sealed, lead-lined coffin. Lead was chosen to slow decay and contain odor, sounding like dignified protection. Yet the very method chosen to give him a majestic burial may have helped create the conditions for a humiliating failure. Scientists think the likely reason for what happened next was pressure inside that sealed space. Tissues break down after death, and bacteria release gases such as methane and hydrogen sulfide. In open air, some of that change disperses. In a coffin, where those gases cannot escape, with no drainage and no modern embalming methods strong enough to halt what was happening, the pressure rises. The lead lining, meant to preserve order, kept the gases from escaping and turned containment into a pressure vessel. He was especially vulnerable because of severe obesity, chronic infections, and ulcerated wounds. A larger frame offered more mass, meaning more fluid, more gas, more weight, and more strain. The same form that had become difficult to manage in life became difficult to contain in burial. The formal procession was carrying not just a dead leader, but a worsening problem. Outside, there was ceremony, tribute, and people performing loyalty. Inside, a physical breakdown was refusing the illusion of control. The institution can cover affairs, state documents, and carefully staged memory, but it cannot fully cover decay. Movement over rough roads, combined with the extreme weight and internal pressure, could have caused the lead lining to split or fail. The evidence points to layered strain, gas building inside, motion during transport, and structural weakness growing. The leakage reportedly happened overnight at Sion Abbey during the burial journey. By morning, attendants reportedly found fluid on the floor. They had to call plumbers to reseal the coffin. The report that plumbers were called is one of the most revealing details in the whole chain of memory. Plumbers are ordinary, yet his remains, carried with royal care, needed them by morning for a hasty repair job. It turned a perfect ceremony into a private emergency, suggesting that even in death, his frame had become a problem for other people to manage quickly and quietly. Some accounts describe a dramatic event, while others describe a split or leak. Historians debate the exact mechanics, but they agree. The remains decomposed badly enough to damage the coffin and create the leaking stories. The damage itself is the constant. Later writers added a darker detail. A stray dog reportedly came in and lapped at the leaked liquid. The accounts handle this carefully, noting the animal story comes from later retellings and may be an embellishment or exaggerated. But the reason the tale survived and spread so widely is that it connected to a real prophecy. Friar William Peto had previously compared him to the biblical king Ahab and warned he would share that exact tragic end. Peto did use that exact scriptural language. The biblical scene already carried judgment and disgrace. By invoking Ahab, Peto placed the ruler inside a story people already knew, making the warning portable. Once the coffin leaked, the two pieces fused. The prophecy gave the physical mess a moral meaning, and the leak gave the sermon flesh. The animal detail closed the circle neatly, turning a burial mishap into a finished act of moral theater. Kings are hard to judge while they live because they have armies and loyal pens, but after death, stories do that work for the public. People wanted his end to mean something beyond burial trouble, answering the accusations already spoken against him. The narrative shifted from a practical failure of embalming to a cosmic sign of punishment. He chose to be buried at St. George's Chapel in Windsor, specifically beside Jane Seymour. Out of his 6 wives, she was the one placed with him because she gave him what no one else had given him, a living son, Edward. That decision looked like devotion at last, a leader fixing his own story in a quiet vault beneath the chapel floor. The accepted narrative usually leaves the vault closed, granting a clean ending, and leaving the public with a perfect royal image. But the records show that in 1813, more than 2.5 centuries later, the underground space was opened. The workers were seeking the resting place of Charles III, and in doing so, they came face to face with the earlier dead in the same vault. The observers found something no official history likes to admit. Jane Seymour's smaller coffin, close beside his, was found intact and left untouched. His massive burial case was severely damaged. The 1813 report described it in language no one can smooth out, stating it was heavily impacted about the middle. The easier version says something dramatic happened only to his coffin, turning it into a dark joke about getting what he deserved. But the documents from 1813 do not give that neat ending, leaving the damage unexplained on the spot. Background notes from St. George's and later commentaries outline several likely causes: structural failure inside the vault, rough disturbance when Charles III was added in 1649, or pressure from within his own burial case as years passed. Vaults are built spaces under pressure where stone shifts, supports fail, and heavy loads settle. If part of the vault gave way, the largest and most exposed coffin would take the worst of it. His container, being larger and more central, was the most likely to suffer crushing or impact. Jane's smaller coffin, lower and less exposed, could survive the same event with little or no visible harm. Furthermore, the addition of Charles I in 1649 meant manual work in a tight, underground space more than a century after the original funeral. The vault may have been altered roughly, causing his burial case to be struck, shifted, or compressed. Position is everything in a confined area. One object becomes the obstacle, while another stays just out of the line of disturbance. Finally, the third explanation involves the body itself. Burial cases change over time as materials weaken, pressure builds, and seals fail. His coffin may simply have given way from within as much as from without after more than 2.5 centuries. The 1813 account preserves this uncertainty, refusing to flatter later storytellers with one bizarre event. The system tries to make leaders look eternal, but the vault record shows how little control survives underground. Henry VIII gave England a frame built for spectacle, sacrificing his physical limits to project invincible authority. He gave 11 years to agonizing medical treatments, enduring red-hot irons without relief just to stay in command. He gave his youth to sport, only to spend his later decades trapped inside a cycle of immobility and failing health. He structured his own burial to ensure absolute dignity beside the woman who secured his dynasty, dictating the exact terms of his memory. The system rewarded him by sealing him in a leaded container that buckled under its own biology, turning his final journey into a plumbing emergency and leaving his remains in a broken vault. The public memory then turned that physical collapse into a moral fable about stray animals and biblical curses. if you have given everything to institutions that prefer polished myths over human realities, letting you absorb the pain while they manage the optics. The pattern was designed this way.